morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to our moderator, Ms. Adejoke Babington Ashe, and to our esteemed panelists for making time in your busy schedules to be with us today. We're looking forward to a great discussion and to learn from you all. And I encourage our participants to take notes because you'll definitely be needing the notes that you get from this session today. I would also like to give a special recognition and thanks to our co-organizers, Diverse Law Nigeria, represented by Phillips Adekemi and Mary Martins, who have done a great job in also helping us bring this panel to our audience. So enjoy the day's session, the evening session, whatever your time zone may be. And we look forward to engaging with you beyond this webinar. Welcome and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Japa.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Martins, and first I'll be introducing Mrs. Funke Agbo. So Funke Agbo is a partner in the Shipping and Litigation Group of ACAS Law, specializing in maritime commercial litigation and commercial arbitration. Mrs. Agbo is the first woman lawyer specializing in maritime law to be awarded the Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Mrs. Agbo is a graduate of University of Lagos and has her LLM from University College London. With over 30 years legal experience, she is an integral part of the litigation and arbitration group of the firm, representing clients on a broad range of commercial transactions before trial and appellate court, as well as international arbitration. I would also be introducing Ms. Linda Cassonde. Linda Cassonde is a lawyer and a civil rights activist. She holds an LLB from University of Leicester and an LLM from University of Cape Town. She is the founding manager of a law firm, LCK Chambers. She is also the founder and executive director of Chapter 1 Foundation, which promotes and protects human rights defenders, constitutionalism, the rule of law, and social justice in Zambia. In April 2019, she was elected as Vice President for Africa for the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, the first Zambia woman to hold that position. She was also the first woman to be elected as the President of the Law Association of Zambia in the history of the Bar Association in Zambia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Sob, I introduce Dr. Sob. Dr. Sob is the founder and director of Horizon Consulting International and is the president of Africa 21, an NGO and think tank. He holds a doctorate in international relations from the Institute of International Relations of Cameroon and a doctorate in law from the University of Geneva. He is an ILO certified expert in participatory gender audits. He has over 20 years as a senior official in the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva. Before joining the United Nations, he served as legal advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, as chair to the Cabinet of the President of the Republic of Cameroon in charge of diplomatic issues, and deputy permanent representative to the Permanent Mission of Cameroon in Geneva. I would introduce Judge Monica. Judge Monica is a judge of the Ugandan Court of Appeal and the presiding judge at the East African Court of Justice. She graduated from the Faculty of Law, Makerere University, with a Bachelor of Laws and holds a Master of Laws in International Trade Law from the University of Essex in the United Kingdom. Prior to joining the bench, Judge Mugain was in private practice at Mugain & Company Advocates and served as the manager of corporate services at the Uganda Road Fund. She also previously worked in the office of the Attorney General and in the privatization unit.
As everyone can hear, we have an amazing panel. And so we are just gonna go ahead and jump right in. Round one, so this is almost like a boxing match. Round one, there's a curtain raiser. We're gonna ask each panelist to please just take 2 minutes to share with the audience why and how you pursued your career trajectory. So I'm going to start with, and also I just want to say the panelists have very kindly obliged to allow all formalities to be set aside. So I'm going to start with Funke.
Yeah, hello everyone, and I'm really glad to be here. The other eminent panelists. And the why and the how are sort of merged together. There are a lot of people who have said, when you ask them why they went into law or why they pursued this particular career, they will tell you, oh, that they've always wanted to be a lawyer, or they had this role model and so on. But for me, there was really no epiphany moment as such that happened. I was an art student in school, and going to university, in the time that I did, the professions were very few that you could go to. So there was law, there was medicine. If you were a science student, you do medicine or pharmacy or dentistry or something. And if you're an art student, for profession, you do law. And if you had some finance background, then you probably do accounting. And if you're really, really good at maths or something, you do engineering. I was constrained by what I knew and what I could do. And being an art student, the natural projection was to do law. And what I just needed to do was to meet the requirements to get into law in the university, which was quite a high bar at the time. And I was really glad that I was able to do that. I had actually wanted to do international law and French, so I would have probably ended up at the UN. I thought that was my dream, really. But it never happened that way. Because when I then qualified, it didn't make any sense to go, at that time, it made no sense to be going to study a language in the 1970s, something or the other, and become a diplomat. I mean, it was just so far removed from anything that I could have imagined. So law made sense. I could see lawyers around me. They were the creme de la creme of the society, and why not? So that's really the how and the why I did law.
Perfect, thank you. I think a lot of people can relate to that climate of, well, here are your options, accounting, engineering, and so on. So many people can relate to that. Thank you so much, Funke. And so Linda, please, what's your why and how?
Firstly, thank you for having me today, and good afternoon, good evening to everybody. I also didn't have a predestined plan to become a lawyer as such. When I was growing up, my dad always thought that I'd become a journalist because I liked to write stories. But the older I got and the closer I got to university, my mother always advised my sister and I that as women, it was important to have a profession, because whatever happens to you, you'll always be that thing, and you always have that thing to fall back on. So I'd always been interested in history and English at school, and I thought it was a natural progression to get into law. But thankfully, I did like it, and specifically, I enjoyed the course on civil liberties in my first degree, and that led me into the profession that I am now, 20 years later, doing human rights work, which was a long journey because I was in a corporate firm for many years, 15 years, before I went back to do human rights law. So come full circle.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you. And Monica?
Thank you very much. I think on my side, I probably became a lawyer by default. I always planned to be a teacher, and specifically a literature teacher. However, at the stage of A-levels, I had a headmistress, and actually she was my literature teacher as well. And she said, yes, you are good at literature, but I think you'd make a lousy teacher and a very good lawyer. So I was a fairly strong-willed person, and I was not impressed by her assessment. So I put education as my first choice. Quietly behind my back, she changed my choices and insisted that this would make an excellent lawyer and a very lousy teacher because she's very argumentative. So that's how I wound up at the Faculty of Law. Now, when it came to my second degree, I actually planned to do human rights. And my entire background was in human rights up till that stage. However, while I was at the Attorney General's office, again by default, the Attorney General decides we've got a vacuum in the commercial law area as a country. So it's important we start to build capacity in commercial law, trade law. That's when AGOA was a hot cake. And that's how I wound up in the trade law area. So really, law and commercial law have been by default. I shall not get into my career at this stage. I think I'll wait for a question specifically on that. But winding up as a judge as well was another default process. Young judges were required. I had the experience. I had been a courtroom lawyer all through. So somebody decided she will never accept to be a judge because she's enjoying the litigation aspect of it. So my name was forwarded without my knowledge. I was simply invited for a discussion as to what it takes to be a judge, and that's how I wound up as a judge.
That's amazing. So the first thought that came to my mind when you mentioned the headmistress changing, I thought that's a violation of the rights of the child to go behind your back and change your choices. But it's interesting how default and providence and fate perhaps they've led you where you are. And so last but not least, Pierre.
Hello, great to see all of you. I would say my interest in diplomacy was triggered by one lesson at the Faculty of Law when I was in the 4th year, because we used to have this program for four years for the bachelor for those who wanted to pursue doctoral studies, engage in teaching at the university level. So in that course was on diplomatic immunities, and the professor, laid it out so well that I said, probably this is the one thing I have to do. So when I got back home, I discussed with my father, and then he said, yes, you have someone in the family who is already a diplomat. He was the chief of service for African services in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I had a brief chat with him, and then he said, please, I don't want to be the only diplomat in the village and in the family. So why don't you join me, so at least we could have someone else, because he was already in the 50s at that time. And given the circumstances, I think at 55 was the age at which people retired. And to just give me a boost, when I completed the course and I was trying to reflect how to pursue this diplomatic dream, I received a scholarship from the Scholarship of Excellence from the Swiss government for, to support me for this doctoral study. That's how I found myself engaged in this. And now the other aspect is, how did I pursue the career? Well, I would say as a lawyer, I thought I was relatively good in analysis, legal analysis, because I had studied Latin in secondary school. I loved history. So nearly everything that would have made things easy for me to be in diplomacy I had already acquired it. So that's how I simply, took the competitive exam to enter into this diplomatic academy in Yaoundé, where I got my doctorate in international relations. In the French system, you have, when you are the first person, the amount of successful candidate for the entry, it counts. You mention it like, in French, you say major à l'entrée. And then I was again major à la sortie at the end. So it opened, the doors quite open in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And then I chose to go into the legal service. After 6 months, I was appointed head of the legal service and legal counsel of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, because I had the chance to participate in renegotiating a number of treaties with France and the UK. And apparently I was very tough, and people complained back to the ministry that they should change the young guy who is creating problem in negotiations. And then the minister told them, well, that's the only one we have, so you have to find a way of accommodating him.
Okay, that's wonderful.
That was it.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. It's really nice to hear all your stories, because one thing that it shows is it's not as though it's a clear path to where we have all ended up. And I think it's very important for our audience to hear that. It's not always a very clear path, but things work out in a way that is so amazing, because from default to providence and fate, you've all become change makers in your field. And so we're going to go into round 2 and just talking a little bit about how you have made waves in your field. So I'll start with Funke. You are the first woman maritime lawyer in Nigeria to be awarded the Senior Advocate of Nigeria SAN title. And for those who may not be aware, it's pretty much Queen's Counsel as it is in the UK. So could you please share with us what are some effective strategies for excellence in legal practice in a global economy?
Yeah, thank you, Adejoke. All right. Well, it seems my claim to fame here is the fact that I was the first woman maritime lawyer in Nigeria to be conferred with the rank of Senior Advocate of Nigeria. And indeed, yes, it was indeed a great privilege for me. I did maritime law as part of, in terms of how I even became a maritime lawyer. After qualifying, I got a degree in Nigeria. I went on to do a master's, and it just happened that the subjects, when I left to do the master's, my intention was to do corporate law, because that was really popular at the time, corporate law, company law, and things like that, banking and finance, that sort of thing. But at the university I went to, you had to take 3 subjects from a particular college. This was University of London, and they had colleges all over the place. So at the University College London, been admitted for the master's program, and you had to take 3 courses at the University of London, and then you had to take 1 course in another college. And so all my plans, because when I made the application, it was corporate law, because they asked you what you wanted to do. And I thought it was going to be very straightforward. I got there, and then I had to take these 3 courses. And I thought to myself, I didn't want to choose disparate courses that made sense. And so they had this suite of courses, which were also the maritime law based, carriage of goods by sea, maritime law, and marine insurance. And they were all taught in University College. And so I thought I'd just do that. So at least it's a sort of it's sort of focused rather than all over the place. And then I had to choose a course in another college. I looked around, I looked at King's College, I looked at Queen Mary, and they had this course on civil litigation. I think that would work well. So I did the course in civil litigation. And so I did all of that. I mean, without really thinking about maritime law or anything. I didn't even know that there was a maritime law practice in Nigeria or there were any maritime law practitioners. I had no idea whatsoever. But when I completed the course, I came back to Nigeria, and it was then I said to myself, I might as well look for a shipping law firm. And I found that there were 4. There were just 4. And they were all, the old school type of law practitioners. So they were all, all around one individual with a few lawyers. And so I ended up in one of them and worked there for about 7 years. And it was an extraordinary experience, because shipping law, maritime law at that time in Nigeria it was really such a really sexy thing to be doing. And everybody was like, maritime law, shipping law, you're talking about ships, and it all sounded so esoteric and so grand and everything, vessels, and it just sounded really, and I really felt really, really, really special. And again, because of the nature of the work, we used to work with a lot of international lawyers, even then in the early 80s. And so I actually earned a lot more than my peers in other law firms at the time. So I just felt really special. And I really enjoyed it tremendously, because, it seemed like you had an edge over. At the same time, it was commercial law at the end of the day. And of course, you meet the same things. So in terms of going forward, I continued in that trajectory, and I sort of built a name for myself in that field. And so when I joined the partnership of Adepetu Cassonde and Shegun, which is ACAS Law today, that was really what I brought to the table, as well as my proficiency as a courtroom lawyer, because it was litigation and so on. And so that started my path towards becoming a senior advocate in that regard. And so but I hadn't actually thought to become a senior advocate. It was not a plan that I had. It just seemed, it just was not a thing that I was thinking about. It was guys that used to do that. I wanted to get married, I wanted to have children, and I just didn't think about that. It was only after a while I realized that it would make sense for me to do that. But I started the process deliberately early, because I had other things I wanted to do. And I didn't really think about it as a setback. So my peers, who were guys, who were men, who were on that path, I became a senior advocate in 2016. That's maybe 34 years ago. My peers who I went to school with, who were on the same trajectory, who were men, The earliest ones became senior advocates you can imagine the time period. But I didn't think about it as a setback. I just thought that was my time. So I'm quite happy with that. But in terms of, you asked about strategies for excellence in legal practice in the global economy. I mean, strategies for excellence in any kind of discipline, any kind of area, legal practice, and it's pretty much the same thing, especially since today everything is globalized. But for me, the key things are, you have to have focus, because you have to be determined, you have to want to make a difference, you have to enjoy what it is you're doing. Because if you enjoy what you're doing, then you will do it well. So you have to do it well. You have to be a reliable person. As a young lawyer coming into practice, you have to be someone that can be counted upon to deliver when they ask you to do something, when you have been assigned a task. The only way that people will that you get noticed and people will know that is if you deliver on time, every time. Ask questions, ask the right questions, be interested, be keen, be enthusiastic. Be enthusiastic. You don't want someone who is grumpy looking or who's looking like they have one problem or the other. If you have a problem and have an issue, you can discuss it. But you have to be receptive to what someone is telling you. You can have a grumpy boss, people do, but that also has to do with, managing a bit of that. Another thing that I think, especially these days, that is really, really key, especially in the practice of law today in a global economy, is that you have to have commercial awareness. Commercial awareness is not something that you gain overnight. It's part of the process of developing yourself. So you really have to invest in yourself. You have to make an effort to invest in yourself. If you work in an organization who don't really things that, or the structure is not such that they train early, or you have to get to a certain point before you train, you have the opportunity to train yourself. There's so much going on the internet. We say in Nigeria, Google is your friend. Go to Google. There are all kinds of things that all go to the internet. Click, I want to learn to be this. Click, I want to be like this. I want to learn how to be focused. I want to learn how to be determined. I want to learn about commercial awareness. Put it in there, you'll find it. Read it. Absolutely. Learn it. Invest in yourself. So when you do that, when people speak to you and you respond, they know that this is someone who wants to go somewhere, and they'll help you along the way. So commercial awareness is very, very key as far as I'm concerned. And the issue of self-improvement is constant. You just have to do that. And that's the only way that you can make a difference, that people will pay attention to you. And also, don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid. At any level, don't be afraid. You've gone through that whole of going through, you've learned all these principles, these difficult principles. You now have to learn how to apply it to life situations. So from the point of learning and actually applying it to situations, you're going to need guidance. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to ask for help. This is what especially people who are really bright, they forget that sometimes they may not always have the answers. You ask for help. So some of those and of course today you have to be, I mean, I grew up with computers, so I don't have to tell them that they need to be technologically capable because they all are. But go the extra mile. The things that matter to the law firm as a business, get involved in it. Know what's going on. Know what the businesses are doing. Know what is happening in the country. Know what is happening in different industries. Know what's happening with your client, what your client is doing. This is the importance of having empathy with you're in a meeting with your boss and for instance, you read about the company that you're dealing with and you pipe up with something interesting. They'll say, oh, look at that young lady or that young guy. Who is he? That kind of thing. That's how you get noticed. That's how you take that extra step. That's why you get noticed above everybody else. Because sometimes you have two people vying for the same position. And one is wondering, why is this person? And then you have to point out to that person that this person actually goes the extra mile to get the attention that he needs to get the attention of. So these are some of the key things I think are really important. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really hope everyone's taking notes, because these are what I like to call nuggets of wisdom, and are applicable actually at all phases of your career. So as you're starting, as you're in the middle, whichever phase is extremely important. And Funke, there's something that you mentioned, which I'm going to pose as a question, hopefully later on to the entire panel. You had mentioned about how the men were able to reach, people think, oh, Sun is, like the heights, right? So they were able to reach a little bit earlier than you. And I think it's important for us to discuss, since we do have women who are up and coming and trying to make it, whether there are concerns about, the societal issues for women being able to advance and reach certain stages in their career. But I'm going to put that as a question later, because I think this is not a women's problem. It's also a men's problem. It's an everybody's problem. And so I hope we get a chance to discuss that later. So I'm going to go on to Linda. Linda, you are known to be a fearless defender of women's rights, promoter of women's empowerment and women in leadership. So could you please advise female lawyers who intend to assume leadership positions? If you had one or two key pieces of advice for women who want to assume leadership positions, what would they be?
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is that the world is skewed in favor of men assuming leadership positions. And that's because, there are studies abound that, in fact, both men and women generally prefer to have a male leader. They do a female leader. So you have to struggle a bit more to get there. And I noticed that a lot of women actually opt out of leadership positions because they think it's too risky, it's too difficult, they don't want to put themselves in the front. So a lot of the decision happens at the very beginning. You have to agree that you need to put yourself forward in the first place. And, there's a story that I came across of one of the big four accounting firms, of the lady who eventually became the head of the global association. And she was saying how when she was a younger associate in the firm, all her colleagues were being promoted ahead of her. And she worked very hard. She was very good at what she did. So she approached her boss to ask, why is it that these other people are being promoted against, as opposed to me? And she listed all the things that she'd done for the firm, pointing out how hard she'd worked, how many deals she'd obtained. And her boss said, I didn't know that you'd done all those things. Because there are a lot of women sit in a corner hoping to be anointed to these positions, when really sometimes you've just got to put yourself out there. And then the other thing I would say is it's really important to support other women who find themselves in these positions, because it's only when we have a critical mass of women in leadership that it'll be seen as a norm and not some kind of exception. It's great to be the first this, the first that, but ultimately you need to make sure that you're not the last. And I think you also need to understand why it's important to have women in leadership, because women bring a different perspective to the table. And that's not to say that women as a group are homogenous, they're not, which is why we need more than just one woman. But women have different experiences to men, and that brings a different quality to the table. So it's really important to bring that with you. But build allies with both men and women, and ask for help and talk to your mentors. It's really, really all about being deliberate and planning your way to the top.
Perfect. Thank you. Those are excellent, excellent nuggets of wisdom. I hope people are just exploding with, all this is really, really very, very, very useful. And the points that you raised, they apply in law firms, they apply in international organizations, everywhere. And so it's so important for people to be aware of these things. So I'm going to go now to Monica. Your career trajectory has often included being one of the youngest. So we've talked about being the first woman, first this, and now the youngest among your cohort. How did you successfully transition from the bar to the bench? Hello, Monica, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes.
You broke off a little bit. If you could just repeat your question.
Absolutely. Thank you. So your career trajectory has often included being one of the youngest among your cohort. How did you successfully transition from the bar to the bench? Is it just me? Monica seems frozen.
I think she is.
Yes, can you hear me now? I can hear you.
Okay, it seems maybe if you switch off your camera, as much as you'd love to see you, I wonder maybe if it's your internet?
I think it's now more stable.
Okay, perfect. Were you able to get the question?
No, I had a little bit about the youngest.
Yes, so essentially, how did you transition from being on the bar, to being on the bench, to now being a judge, from being an advocate to being a judge?
Okay, all right. I think basically the legal profession is about integrity. That's the bottom line. So I think very early in a lawyer's career, a decision must be taken about what sort of lawyer one is going to be. Quite early in my career, I decided I was going to run the course of professionalism, and I did not wish to be categorized as a female lawyer. As far as I was concerned, I was going to be viewed as a lawyer, and regardless of my gender, I was going to compete with the men. So that's the approach I took. Now, having said that, a lot of things are done by many professionals, but they still do not seem to move forward. What I decided to do, perhaps I had the sort of mentors that ensured I was visible. There's a colleague that I worked with in the privatization unit, was an international consultant. This has to do with networks. He was an international consultant. He took a look at my CV and said, look, you have done so many things. You've accomplished so much, and it's not reflected in your CV. So he redid my CV, and I could not recognize myself. He literally branded me into something that was exceptional. Now, with all he did was place my CV as I was at that time, but then include a section for accomplishment. And some of the things I had done seemed really minute to me, but to him it was a big deal. So with my CV reflecting all these accomplishments, I must have seemed like a huge giant before somebody met me physically. So I think it's important to document. I think the last panelist talked about, Linda, I think, talked about nobody is going to anoint you. You need to document what you have done in some sort of document. If it's not your curriculum vitae, have it somewhere and make it visible so that you will be recognizable and your accomplished appreciated. So that is what got me visible. And of course, as a litigation lawyer, I was in the faces of the judges most of the time. And if you have decided to be efficient, somebody somewhere will notice. So along the line, I started having many senior judges after a court session calling the Attorney General and saying, a very good state attorney has just appeared before us. You need to encourage her, she can go places. Now, when that continued to happen, the judiciary approached me and said, we would like to bring you across. Initially, I was very hesitant. I didn't like the idea of starting off as a magistrate because the trajectory from magistrate to the higher bench tends to be a lot more difficult. So I drew it out and decided to continue to do the litigation and a little bit of solicitor work. Now, when I ventured into the cross-border transactions, at that point, I had gone international. So the feedback that was coming back now was going even higher up. It started to go a little bit higher. And at that point, I could no longer be ignored. So that's when I was invited to join the bench. I was called for an interview. I passed the interview. I got onto the bench as the youngest as the youngest judge. Now the shift from the local bench to the East African Court of Justice. In the East African Court of Justice, I was not only the youngest, but then I was the principal judge, meaning the youngest and only female was now the head of a court of judges who were way older than her. Now, at that point, as a woman, everybody is simply waiting to see you fail. It's like you're a disaster waiting to happen. And because we need to be sensitive to our environment. You need to know what you're up against. I was very well aware that I was a disaster waiting to happen. So I determined to prove all my critics wrong. I went the extra mile. I did a lot of work. I put in about twice as I should have put in, really. And I think my contract ends next year. I think I have done a pretty good job. So that alone speaks for itself. Now, basically, it's about networks, getting the right mentors, having those mentors know exactly what you have accomplished, document your success, and then brand yourself. Get known for something. Don't move with the crowd. Don't simply drift with the crowd. Get known for something. So somebody will know when the name Monica comes up, that is integrity, that is professionalism, and that is results. When the name Mary comes up, that is professionalism, that is outputs, that is, you get known for something. But if you simply drift, nobody will know you. You shall drift with the crowd and get lost in the crowd. Somebody that wants to make a mark that goes beyond gender, goes beyond age, goes beyond any minority considerations, has to determine what sort of networks I shall align myself with, identify role models, and try to work up to those role models, get good mentors, mentors that will push you, mentors that will advocate for you. But for somebody to be willing to mentor you, you must have something to show for it. So document what you have done, document your accomplishments, brand yourself, and get known for something. You cannot simply afford to drift. Drifting will get you nowhere. Just simply get known for something. Get known for being a good judge, a good lawyer, a good corporate advocate. Get known for something. Brand yourselves.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. And we're getting a lot of love in the chat box, people saying loving the story. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think one thing that really struck me, well, many things struck me in what you said, but one thing that struck me is that oftentimes we're very shy to advertise ourselves, shy to brand ourselves. We're hoping to be discovered in one way or the other. The good thing is, with social media, with LinkedIn, people can post, things that they've done on there, make sure they update their CVs and so on. So I'm going to move to our solo male panelists. And to Pierre, you have mentioned earlier your background in law, in politics, international diplomacy. You shared a little bit in the beginning. I would like to actually segue a little bit into the mentorship question. Since we've touched a little bit on issues concerning gender equality, the opportunities that women have maybe to advance quickly to their career, in their career, seem fewer than that for men. So I just want to ask you, as a gender equality activist and someone who has actively engaged in mentorship, could you please identify challenges that young professionals encounter in the early stages of their career and suggest some ways to solve these?
Okay, I would start by saying that taking any new job is always overwhelming. So it is important for us to be prepared psychologically and sometimes even physically. I would remember that when I joined the UN, the first thing my boss told me was, make sure you go out jogging at least 3 times a week, because sometimes if you are not physically fit, you would not be able to mentally adjust to the type of job and solicitation you may be the subject. So first thing, make sure that you are prepared to confront the overwhelming nature of the work. Now, at any workplace, you'll find for new incoming staff, there is conflict in the workplace. Some of the conflict could be overt, some other would be less overt. There is a lack of transparency. This is something I'm trying to sum up just to show the big picture of things that you may have to confront, even though they may not be immediately visible. And then more generally, there is poor management, because as much as you may have managers who are senior, who have occupied various positions, they may not necessarily have taken the proper management course, and they are not prepared as managers. Maybe they could deliver if they had substantive issues to address, but in terms of management, I would say at the UN, it is relatively poor. I'm coming from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, which is considered as one of these quote unquote intellectual organizations, because you have the minimum degree to hope to have a chance to get there is a master's degree. And many young colleagues who joined during my last years, most of them have 2 or 3 master's degrees, just to be sure that they increase their chances, in particular as the previous speaker was talking, especially female candidates. because they say the boys, they will always have a trick to get their way. But for us women, we have to prove multiple times that we are capable of doing the same job. And once these issues have been addressed, that is the conflict in the workplace, how do you address those conflicts? How do you address the issue of the lack of transparency and the poor management? The other thing which targets especially female colleagues, I'm speaking because I've had to work with female colleagues, either in terms of mandates or in terms of staffing. Because in my last position as head of the section dealing with women's rights and gender, we were 24 and I had 22 female colleagues. And I can assure you for 4 years that while I was at that service, there was never a single conflict, at least to my knowledge, which means that somewhere I had understood how probably we have to function. Maybe I'll come back with some story at the end if I still have some time. So the other problem, the major problem is what is the dress code and the information overload. The dress code, because sometimes, when there is a conflict or there is a difficulty or there is I would say, some negative attitudes or perceptions of some female colleagues, they tend to say, yeah, it's because they dress X way. Nobody ever asks a male how he dresses. Some would come with all these jeans, what you call to destroy, which is unacceptable in a workplace. Nobody will say anything. What I said in my service was, from Monday to Thursday, you dress formally in a way that if you have to meet diplomats, you don't feel, you don't feel shy because the way you dress, but you should be the person to decide that it is okay for you or not someone else. And number two, that on Fridays, Friday was an open dressing day. That is, you wear whatever you want to come. You can come in shorts, you can come in jeans, you can come in, just basket instead of anything. Because, at some time you have to remember that the workplace is not only for work, it is also a sort of place for socialization. And people feel too much constraint if they are too formally dressed sometimes, often or very often. So those are some of the things I mentioned. Now I want also to talk about how, these young colleagues should look at the way they plan their future in the organization. One is how they build trust, first of all, between themselves and the management in general, and the immediate the immediate supervisors, whether they are male or female. Because you would also note that, anyway, from my own experience, I've noted that sometimes the most critics of female are not male. They may be critics, but they will do it behind your back, as you say. But the female are the ones who are more openly critical about the way sometimes they're not even justified, but simply because they feel there is a competition. And in this area where the idea is to make sure that you promote women, each female feels that she should be the person, not the other one. Whereas there are other means of, promoting your image or building a good image or I would say refining your career profile or making yourself known as, I think it was Monica who was saying that you should be known for doing something, that you should leave something. And that has always been my objective. I wanted to leave something in that office. And there are a number of issues that I think I could have done better, but at least I contributed to one big thing, which is the UN SWAP, the UN System-Wide Action Plan on Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women. During 2 years, I worked with a team of 4 persons from UN Women. We built it. It was shared around the UN system at some level. Then it was approved by the UN senior management. So I'm proud that I was part of that exercise, and I helped implement that at the level of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights before I left. And there were many other changes that may not be visible, but at least that made life of female colleagues easier than it was before. Now, I think you mentioned what would be the solutions of addressing some of these difficulties that they may be encountering. I think one of the first things would be to adjust to the institution's culture. In each institution, there is a culture. You know, I would just mention two, which are not necessarily glorious things to do, but you have these coffee machines. You always see people around the coffee machine, and around those coffee machines, that's where most of the decisions are made. Informal consultations are made, and decisions are made, and the chief makes his mind on certain stuff based on what he or she hears around the coffee machine. The other one is the after work. Unfortunately, at the after work, it has finally turned to be, shown to be a male exercise. Because I remember once I had two female colleagues who came to the after work of the branch. I was the chief of the section. Then on top, there were four sections in one branch. So it was an after work of a branch. And then I heard some male colleagues make comments that these female colleagues are coming to hunt. That is, they're coming to, because they want to, they look for men or something like that. And I objected to it. And then after that, I brought the issue to the chief of the branch. We had a discussion with that colleague, and that colleague understood that if that was heard again, it would affect the rating at the end of the year. And between that time and the time I left, that is about 2 years, he had a totally different attitude, because he understood that what he thought was not shared by other male, in particular at the managerial level, because that's how some of them plan. They try to diminish, the capacity of make negative comments on their female colleagues with the hope that they will be the ones to get the position if at all there was a vacancy. And one of the things I would advise for colleagues, either male or female, is try to identify time wasters, because in the UN, I'm talking specifically about the UN because that's where I have my experience mostly at international level. You know, one of the major problem is waste of time in meetings, not just because meetings sometimes are not justified, but because meetings take too much time. I remember once I tried to make an estimate of the time I spent in meetings. For a week, I spent as much as 2 full working days in meetings. And at the end of the month, I could not show what those meetings brought to my work or brought to the organization. So I suggested during one of the senior management team meetings that we should reassess, the holding these meetings and limit the meetings. And from that time, after a series of exchanges, the High Commissioner decided that no meeting would exceed an hour, and that there would be no reason for a meeting to be held more than once a week if there was no proper justification. So those are some of the things that would help at least allow a staff to be better, perceived as someone who wants to contribute to the success of the institution.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much, Pierre. That is so rich. And I know that people value that experience that you shared in terms of the UN, in terms of international organizations, because sometimes these places can seem like a black box for those who want to access the UN, but they don't really have an understanding of the culture, of what are things that they need to be aware of. I'm very happy that you mentioned the institutional culture that might not necessarily be great, like the coffee machines and decisions that are made there. I recall, because my background is also in international organizations, so I recall someone sharing that he was afraid that he will now need to take up smoking because he realized that decisions were being made by managers who will go out and smoke and have a cigarette, and then they'll talk about key issues, and by the time they're done smoking, whoever is going to be the lead on the team has been assigned. So he was afraid that if he needs to get in there, then he better take up smoking, which is pretty dangerous. There needs to be transparency and opportunities for everyone in this institution. And so a lot of what you've talked about here, touched on mentorship, which is what we're going to focus on now in maybe sort of like a rapid fire way. So if we can be succinct with our responses, that would be great, so that we can get through them and then also get into the Q&A. So Monica, you had mentioned You know, Brandon, you also mentioned mentor. You had spoken to a mentor of yours who then made the great suggestion of transforming your CV to the point where you didn't even know who that person was. So mentorship is clearly important. So, and this is a question that has been put in the chat box. How can people secure mentors? You know, just, you know, a basic, you know, practical, you know, steps that they can take. Because for some people, they say, let's, you know, we just started, we just graduated, we are afraid to reach out to people. How do we secure mentors? And then once they secure them, how do they effectively maintain the mentorship relationship?
Okay, thank you very much. Perhaps I should approach it from a practical point of view. I'll start with the approach for a young graduate, a fresh employee, a fresh professional. Then I'll ease it into the average mid to senior level professional. As a young graduate, nobody knows you. You probably don't have much experience save for your papers, your academic papers. So what a potential mentor is looking to is a hard worker, a dependable worker, a person who will be given a task and deliver on results as quickly as possible and make sure they are quality results. In that way, in a sense, you are earning the trust of a potential mentor. And you won't have to look too far. The starting point is your bosses, your immediate bosses, and upscaling it right to the very top. But bottom line is be efficient, be productive, be effective as a worker. Now, once you do that, then as this superior starts to hand you more assignments, they are establishing a sort of rapport with you. And then they will see how much they can work with you, how much they can improve you, where your gaps are, and how they can fill up those gaps. Now, already you're establishing a sort of working relationship that can ease into a mentor-mentee relationship. That is the foundational point. Now, when it comes to the more senior professionals, who I think actually might need the mentors even more, you must have something to bring to the table. You don't expect it to be a give relationship from the mentor to the mentee, and the mentee is simply seated back and receiving. There must be a dual relationship where there's something that the mentee brings to the table. And that's where I'll give an example without getting into details. The nature of my profession, I can't afford to get into details. However, there was a boss, actually he was one of the retired chief justices. Since there are many, I'll simply mention one of the retired chief justices of Uganda. So personally, I'm very bold. I get into the judiciary, I'm the youngest judge, and I'm telling myself, I am a woman, I can't afford to make any mistakes, because one mistake of this young female judge will mess it all up for the other potential female judges. So I was being very cautious and very careful. So when I wrote my first judgments, I walked into his office and told him, look, I am about to release these judgments, but as the head of this institution, the buck stops with you. I wouldn't want to embarrass you or the institution or the institution of the judiciary. So could you kindly look through and simply tell me if I'm on the right course? Now with that, when you do that, you're establishing a relationship, a rapport, right from the onset. And then your mentor is looking at a person who is humble or modest enough to seek help. I think that has been mentioned. Somebody that is teachable, willing to be mentored, willing to be taught, and is availing themselves to be taught. So that is the starting point. However, once we had established, of course, he gave me feedback on my judgments, very useful feedback. And once that relationship had been established, at one point, I walked into his office to discuss something totally different, an administrative issue. And I find this gentleman pondering over something. And so in the course of discussion, he asks me a hypothetical question. What would you do if you were faced with scenario A, B, C? So off the cuff, I gave him my opinion. I was extremely humbled to see him actually implement that opinion to the letter in a different scenario. So in a sense, I had added value to the mentor-mentee relationship. And this is a gentleman who, till this day, is forever pushing me places. Wherever a nomination comes up, he's quick to say that lady will do it. I don't even have to think twice, she will do it. So you need to add value to this relationship. It should not be a one-way traffic. Okay. Up your skills and make sure your capacity is built to that level where you are adding value to as much value to the mentor as he is adding to you. But it's very likely that, of course, they would be in a position to add more value. However, they should be able to benefit from this relationship as well. So that in a nutshell would be my response.
That's excellent. And I'm going to push more on this mentor-mentee relationship because I think it's really, really important. So I did have some questions specifically, but I'm going to open it up now because I think it's important. You've given us information in terms of where, people are in perhaps an employment relationship or in a relationship where they can directly build trust with someone who's in a senior position. But how about people trying to get mentors who are not in, they're not working in the same law firm? So I'm going to bring this to Funke. How do you, what advice would you give to people who say, we're interested in getting to maritime law, but maybe they're currently in a human rights law practice, for example, but their passion is maritime law? How do they secure mentors? How do they reach out to you? And also, how would you like to be reached out to? Because I know personally, I have some pet peeves when people reach out to me and they're expecting things of me. What are some things that you would recommend that people should not to do when they're reaching out to people to be mentors?
First of all, it's a big thing for me. It's really, really important. And I think for women, it has to be important, and it really should be front and center of things that you do when you have reached a certain level in your profession or as a leader in your field or somebody or that you have become known for something. And for young lawyers or for young people who are just coming into the profession, yes, I think Linda has, Monica has, obviously they have, well, not that they don't have anything to offer, but basically they just have their academic credentials. They haven't done any work. You're not really known. So for me, I have always thought that you should, and I tell young people as well, you should identify people that you admire, people that you think you would like to be like, obviously because you're a lawyer, so you know a few people. So you try to become a mini-me of someone. And it doesn't have to be a particular person, because at that stage, you may not be knowledgeable enough to identify who exactly you want to be a clone of, so to speak, in terms of your growth path. But you know that you would like to be like this person, or you want to get to where this person is. You wonder how they got there. So you try to learn about this person or anybody, female or male, because people who are driven, this is what you do. And so sometimes when you're not someone who's particularly driven, like I'm not a particularly driven person. So I would have liked someone to have told me earlier in my years, as growing up as a lawyer, to do that, but I didn't do that. So it took me a while to get to that point. So I would always tell young lawyers, identify people that you admire, people, find out about them. There's so much information on the internet about people, find out about them, because you might not be in a position to approach them. But if you know someone who knows them, you could say to them that, oh, I'd like to meet so and so. And of course, at that same time, you also have a responsibility as a senior person, as a sort of, well, for want of a better expression, someone who has accomplished something and who has the opportunity to teach other people how to get to where you are. To young people, to be able to speak with you. I remember that when I was being considered for the rank of senior advocate of Nigeria, the Nigerian Bar Association also interviews you as well. And Nigeria is a big country. I'm based in Lagos. My offices are in Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt. I practice in all those jurisdictions. But there are loads of other parts of the country who have never, the senior advocates in Nigeria, the female senior advocates, I don't think we are more than about, out of a whole load of maybe men, I think we're about maybe 500 strong, and women are about 20, 22 or something like that. So we're very few. And so, if you get on the list of the female senior advocates, you're just one of 20 people, 22 people tops. So people will see you. Somebody who graduated in, oh, there's this lady or there's this woman, they might want to have the opportunity to meet you. And I remember that the association people were saying, you need to make yourself available. And this is something I'm very passionate about. And I say to people, we have to make ourselves available to young people. So I don't feel peeved when anybody approaches me. People approach me all the time. And I listen to what they have to say. I give them advice. I tell them what they need to do. They come back. If they want to build a relationship, they are free to do that. If I can help them in any other way, I will. So mentorship is really key, especially for women who are in senior positions, who people look up to, and who young people want to be their guide in what they're going to be doing in the future. So it's very key for me. I think it's really, really important. And I have no problems with anybody. I'm always willing to assist. And
I guess the question is, the question is, what are some ways for people to make themselves, for their approach to be more effective? So I absolutely agree. And I think that's, why we're all here. I think it's so important that we're open to receiving people reaching out to us. And I think that's absolutely wonderful. That's so important. Mentorship matters. How can people be more effective? So that for us, they're not just sending the same cut and paste email to every single person. So if someone, like you rightly said before, do research on the person, so people don't just send an email to Funke and then write in there, I've always been interested and passionate about human rights and the United Nations, because that's not her background. So it's that kind of stuff. And those are some of the things that I've encountered. So I'll ask you to please just think about it. If maybe there are one or two things that you would like to recommend to people, but I'm going to put this question to Linda. Is there anything like in positioning this, people are positioning themselves to reach out to mentors, in mentoring relationships? What are some things that you would suggest that they should do, or maybe they shouldn't do, so that they can be more effective?
I think I'd like to distinguish three possible types of mentorship. Firstly, a mentorship proper is really a relationship of trust. This is somebody that you get to know very well, whom you can exchange thoughts and ideas with, decide, someone who can help you plan your future. And I would say the best mentorship relationships are ones within your sphere of, I want to say, influence. People who, like your boss, like Judge Monica was saying, your boss, or someone from your church, or somebody that you know is within your sphere, who you can interact with very often. And so the trouble sometimes with trying to form relationships with people who are sort of very high profile is maybe they won't have as much time as you might need to really get into the nitty-gritty. Not that you shouldn't try and do that. I'm sure many people are willing to offer, advice or whatever. But in terms of really close, good, solid mentorship relationships, stick to your sphere of influence. I think that's very important. And then people like, there are people who you admire in the public sphere who maybe you want to learn from. Often those people don't have much time. So maybe what you might want to do is to approach them to ask specific questions about things, rather than, it may develop into a mentorship relationship, it may not, but most people have time at least to answer questions. And then the judge set it out very well in terms of the progression from just being a law student into middle management. The more your achievements, the more likely you are to attract the attention of somebody who certainly is more influential, even outside of your sphere of influence, because your work is speaking for itself. And some of those mentors can actually become sponsors. And from the judge's example, she's had sponsors who have actually lifted her from where she was. For example, the gentleman who helped her rewrite her CV, that elevated her profile so she was able to get more opportunities. Or the former Chief Justice who elevated her to, drew attention to opportunities that she could explore internationally, etc. Those are sponsors. Those are not, well, they may be mentors as well, but they're people who can elevate you and shoot you onto another trajectory. And that's really important to have as well. So I've had a combination of that. And so in my own life, I had very good male bosses in my work who really allowed me to explore my interests even outside of the firm. They gave me time to go on leadership fellowships. And that was really, really important and integral to my success. But also, as the judge also pointed out, developing yourself attracts other people. I invested a lot of time in doing fellowships, for example. I have fellowships from 3 Ivy League colleges, which I, pursued myself because I was interested in doing that. And that helped raise my profile internationally as well. Because when people are looking at my CV, I just don't have just ordinary degrees. I have other things to show for what I've done, as well as my leadership journey. And I also want to mention that, so when I became the president of the Bar Association in Zambia, I was the first woman to occupy that position. So I was basically a unicorn. I didn't know anybody who had walked the same journey as me. And so I now had to start looking outside of my sphere of influence to look for people to look up to. And I found Thuli Madonsela, who had walked the journey as public protector in South Africa, very helpful. I didn't know her personally myself, but I followed her career. I listened to what she said when she gave speeches, and it gave me a lot of confidence because I saw that we were walking the same path, essentially speaking truth to power in our respective positions. And I also looked up to Oprah Winfrey as somebody who I look up to as somebody who models Black excellence for me. And these are people I don't know personally, but I was able to learn something from them by watching. I mean, as Funke was saying, Google is your friend. There's so many videos of their speeches, etc., that you can Google and gain access to. And you can also shoot for the stars. For example, when I was president of the Bar Association, like I said, I didn't know Thuli Madonsela, but I was a great admirer of her. And I just spent months on the phone and email trying to get her to attend one of our events as our keynote speaker. And I got her eventually because I was persistent. And so maybe that's another thing I want to say, that persistence does pay. And again, obviously, if you know that person's journey, they're going to be more attracted to agreeing to whatever you're asking for. Because I researched her very well. So these are all things that you can do. And also don't be afraid if somebody says no. But most people will say yes. I think you should know that as well.
Thank you for that. I think those are great. Those are excellent points. First of all, as everyone has sort of mentioned, do your research on the person. Google is your friend. Find out as much as you can. When you're approaching the person, don't be afraid. Also, I think this is great for those who are in school. If you are organizing an event, this is an excellent way to connect with people. So you can always, you organize an event, reach out to Funke, say, oh, the Law Association of my university, we're putting together a panel on maritime, whatever. We would love for you to speak. That is already a way for you to connect with her, and it's focused on something in particular. And once she speaks, you reach out back to her, thank her for, and that's how you can keep in touch with someone. Also, the panel here, everyone's very busy. Other people that you're reaching out to, it's preferable to reach out with a specific question. As Linda has mentioned, if you have a question, people are able to make time for a question. It may be a little bit more difficult if you send an email to someone that you don't already have a relationship with and you say, please tell me how you made it where you are. That's a little bit more difficult than if you say, I'm, interested in this and exploring this, and I have this particular question. Once they're able to respond to you, you can then build a relationship. So there are different strategies in terms of positioning, especially when you're reaching out to people that are not within your immediate sphere of influence, as Linda has mentioned. But I love how she broke it down to say, that you have mentors, you also have sponsors. Some mentors can become sponsors. So may we all have sponsors like Monica has, because she clearly has some amazing sponsors. So I'm gonna navigate now to our last round before we open up for Q&A. And I don't have Linda. Is Linda still with us? I don't see her anymore. Okay, there you are. So one thing that you had mentioned being the first Zambian woman that was elected to the bar, but you're also elected as the vice president of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association. And could you share with us some exceptional qualities? So this is what we are going to focus on in this round, developing essential skills and qualities. If you could actually pick one major quality or skill that you think helped bring you to the position that you're at now, and then how young lawyers and law students can emulate that quality.
I think it's pushing the boundaries of what's possible. I remember, for example, during my time at the Law Association, telling people that we could do X. And people tell you all the reasons why you can't do it. And, I think my strength and my superpower is to find a way to make it work, to do it. But I would say, really, the reason I found myself in this position is because I have developed self-development. Like I mentioned, I've done numerous leadership courses. I was involved in the Bar Association a good 10 years before I became president of the association. But it's not about titles. I think that's something that I really want to stress. For me, it's always been about service. What can I offer myself? How can I make things better than where I found them? How can I create opportunities for others, whether as leaders or other opportunities? It should always be about service, because quite frankly, these jobs take up a lot of time, and if you're not committed, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, then you shouldn't do it. And I think it was Funke who mentioned that you should be passionate about what you're doing. Somebody said, in one of these TED Talks, you should do something that you like being good at. And I think that made a lot of sense, because there are things that you're good at that you don't like doing. And that's really just going to be a chore. Whereas if you do something that you like being good at, it's a labor of love. So I would urge people to follow their passions. I know it's cliched, but I think that's the path to excellence. And, as our speakers have been saying, it's when you're excellent that people will notice. As Oprah likes to say, when you do your best, people will notice. And they do it. I mean, it's absolutely true. It's been true in my journey. It's been true, I'm sure, in everybody else's journey that's on this panel. Just do your best, and people will notice.
Absolutely. Thank you, Linda. And so I'm going to go to Funke. What advice would you give to young legal professionals on staying true to themselves and holding on despite the challenges that they may face as they try to break into a particular industry or reach the heights, even to do their best. There are some challenges that people face in that. So what advice can you give them about staying true to themselves?
I think the beauty of this whole discussion that we're having, I think people can already take nuggets of what everybody has said here as the base for actually achieving those goals. When you're starting legal practice, especially in a law firm, the hours can be quite long, and the time that you spend at work is actually quite a lot of time. When I started, I used to work 6 days a week. I used to work even on Saturdays. I used to work till I was meant to work till 2, but my boss was a man. He was old enough to be my father, and he wouldn't get to the office till about 2 o'clock. So when I was meant to be closing at 2, he would just be getting there at 2. So that meant that I would be in the office till 5 o'clock on a Saturday, when everybody was going to weddings, when everybody was going to, parties and stuff. And to be able to go away on a holiday or go take the weekend or go for a wedding, I have to ask permission from him like the week before and say, oh, in 2 Saturdays from now, could I not come to work so I could go to a wedding or something like that? Today, I mean, nobody's going to ask you to stay at work on a Saturday. But at that time, he did it, and I just couldn't say no, that I wasn't going to do that. So, but basically, I was willing to do the work. I was willing to go the extra mile. I was willing to go the extra mile. My work ethic was very, very strong. And so staying late at work was not a problem for me. But obviously, it could be a challenge for other people. And you have to have your goal always ahead of you and focus on it. Your path may not be as straight as other people's paths, especially the paths of men, because they don't have to, but even when they get married, caregiver of children, so that trajectory may not be as straight as your trajectory, going that way, going a different way first, or taking a turn before you get back on the path. That is just your path. That's the way I see it. So don't look at it as a setback. Just look at it as something that you just need to do, get over and get to where you're going. It's just a question of time. So I think that it's just to have the right mindset. And also it's important that you have mentors that will help you make that determination so that you don't feel as if you're disadvantaged in any way. And or just take it on the chin and just move ahead. So it's important that you have these mentors that help you, that guide you. I am really, really big on mentors, and I think Monica's experience is a fantastic one. It's really, that is what mentorship is meant to be. Your mentorship, the relationship you have grows into that of a sponsor. It's in the last couple of years that we've been hearing this difference between the mentor and the sponsor and all of that. So it's all in the same sort of direction. So it's just key to stay on point, have the right attitude, be effective, be diligent, make yourself known, make yourself noticed, be known for something, be reliable, and you will really get to where you're going to go to. That's what I think. That's what I believe.
Excellent. Those are absolutely excellent points, and stuff that we should keep holding on in our minds. I really like when you said have a goal and focus. I was imagining somebody who was maybe doing a long distance race, and the goal is ahead of you, and you just keep running. Don't lose sight. So that's excellent. And so Pierre, with your experience in the UN and international organizations, those who are interested in moving directly, for instance, and forging international careers, what kind of advice would you have? If there was one key point that you would like them to hold in their minds, what would that be as they try to forge a career in international organizations?
Well, just to be sure that your question is well understood. Are there persons who have just graduated or who are doing something else and who are planning to join the UN? Or are you talking about those who are already within the UN and looking for the path or for their career in the organization.
That's excellent. Thank you for that distinction. Actually, so let's even break it down, because we do have some people who are currently working domestically in their countries, but have always had their eye on the UN. What advice would you have for them? And then I'll ask you the question for those who are in the UN, but or in the international organization, but trying to maneuver into another international organization. So for the first one, those who are within their domestic system or recently graduated and are having their eye on getting into the UN.
Well, I think first of all, they have to make sure that the organization they are aiming to join, coincide with their profile. For example, I would not imagine easily, even though it may be possible, a lawyer having as a first priority to join the International Atomic Energy Agency. You have a lot of, physicians and whatnot there, other type of scientists, but you also have lawyers, but in very restricted numbers. So they must make sure that the mainstream, that the organization they want to join is in the mainstream and connects, and matches the initial training. Second thing is to try to find a way of getting an internship with the organization they are aiming at. Because I understand that it is difficult for those who are not close to those organizations. Mainly, from the South, you are far from the theater, so it is not easy for you to join. For example, I see that many institutions, many students or candidates easily leave the United States or Europe to come to take an internship in one place or another, either because they have the resources or because they have the sponsorship of their own university or the academy or civil society organizations which are there to support their work or try to help them, get into these institutions. But if nowadays, I think for the past, I would say half a dozen years or so, the UN, at least from the mainstream secretariat, has ensured that you can also have internship at country level. For example, I remember last time when I visited UNDP in Cameroon, that was 2 years ago, where they had about some 5 interns, not only from Cameroon, but from neighboring countries who had been hired to support their work. That's one thing. The other aspect is that they should also ensure that they are prepared psychologically, because once you may apply 20 times and you may not even have an answer. Unfortunately, that is a practice in the UN. If your candidature is not considered, they do not answer you. They only answer to those who they think would be shortlisted and then move on in the process of hiring. So you shouldn't be discouraged because there is no answer. And thirdly, there are a number of procedures or mechanisms now online by which you can check and see where they are with the process, whether the process is ongoing, whether it's already been concluded. Because if you just sit back and wait for an answer, which may not be coming, then you will never know whether the process has been suspended for one reason or another. And sometimes when you try to check and ask questions, it may trigger someone to decide and say, but why aren't you considering this candidate? So that has happened to me on many occasions while I was still active in the UN, to go through the list of those who had applied for a position and say, well, at least you should put them on the list and give them a chance to come and talk. Because at the UN, we went as far as, at least at the Human Rights Office, as far as making sure that all senior managers could go through the list of candidates to verify that everything was formally and equitably done. Because sometimes they will just check a name if they say it's like Abdul Rahim, no, it's not European, it doesn't sound European. Let's say Pierre, okay, they check Pierre, Cameroon. I know they have big mouth in this country. There is so much prejudice at that level that you cannot even imagine, that sometimes it's good to push a little bit. And if there is a possibility to have a UN country office where they exist to help you, I think it would be a good thing.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So just in light of time, I'm just going to ask Monica quickly, and then we'll move on, because we're getting some really important questions, and we want to make sure that people have their questions posed. So Monica, just very quickly, picking just one, what is one key value skill that you would say, and you've shared a lot with us, so maybe, you know, if there's one out of everything you've shared that you want to drive home, let us know. What is one key value skill that law students and young lawyers must possess to be competitive in the legal practice?
Breaking it down to one, I would say integrity. And the reason I say integrity is it encompasses a lot of things. As a law student, if you're going to be honest to your clients, sorry, as a young lawyer, if you're going to be honest to your clients, it's, I think, a very important way to start. Then secondly, for instance, as a young magistrate, if you're going to conduct your proceedings with integrity, that is one of the most important values that you could have, because the integrity of the process of adjudication is critical to the integrity of the result. As a young lawyer, integrity is important because it will push you to do the hard work. There will be no cutting corners, getting all sorts of people to do your work for you. Integrity will drive you to actually get out there and learn what you must learn. So whether as a student or as a young graduate or as a senior lawyer, I think integrity is the cornerstone of the legal profession.
Excellent, excellent, beautiful, well said, and extremely important. Thank you. So audience, we are now in the Q&A section. You've been posing your questions in the chat box, which is excellent. Please continue to do so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take 3 questions that I've noted that could be posed to everyone. I'm going to ask them now, and whoever wants to answer whichever question, please do so. So Monica had mentioned knowing when to turn down an opportunity to focus on her goals. What are some ways to assess whether early opportunities in your career could be limiting on your future? So that's question 1. What are some ways to assess whether certain opportunities could be limiting or actually beneficial for your future? Question number 1. Question number 2, pose this to everyone. In a situation when you reach out to a mentor and they say, oh, I'll be here for you if you need anything, what should be your response? And I guess this touches on the how do you effectively maintain a mentorship relationship? What are some key suggestions? And then question number 3, if someone does have a mentor or mentorship relationship with you, do you think the mentee should be proactive and approach with a draft of the terms of engagement and desired outcomes? So, interesting questions. Question number 1, what are ways to assess whether early opportunities could be limiting or actually beneficial for your future? Question number 2, how do you respond if a mentor says, I'll be here for if you need anything? How do you maintain the mentorship relationship? And then perhaps more practically, should the mentee be proactive and approach with a terms of engagement and desired outcomes? So who would like to tackle any one of those?
I would like to tackle the one about the assessing whether something is beneficial to you. That's the first one.
Yes.
I think that all this goes to getting advice, really. I think that it's important that going forward as a young lawyer, determining what your future path is, where your future path lies, what it is you want to do. I think that if it is serious to take, as in, should I go this way or that way? You need to just consult with people who you trust, people who you think will give you good advice. And then at the end of the day, it's your decision. So you decide, you approach people who you think will provide you with good advice, your teachers, your mentors, your parents, but not too many people, because you have to take a decision. And that will help you, guide you to whatever step you take. And if it's a mistake, you can always correct that mistake going forward. take advice, go forward, find out, is this what I really want to do? If you find yourself in a place you know you don't want to be in, you want to go somewhere else next, find a way of doing it. Just be proactive about moving forward with your life and what you want to do. Be deliberate, be purposeful, and as I think has been said many times, ask for help. I think that is really key. It is something that I really missed when I was younger, because I really didn't know who to ask. It didn't even occur to me to ask anything. And again, because my trajectory was pretty straightforward, so to speak. But then I think there were some decisions I could have taken when I was younger if I'd known to ask for help. So I think for me, it's really key that you have people that you can trust, that you can ask for guidance, people who have done before things the way you want to do and it hasn't worked. They can always guide you. And if you have taken the wrong step, you can always double back and take the right step going forward. So don't be afraid.
If I could just add on to that, I think it's important that a young graduate knows themselves. It's important to be self-aware. Know who you are, know what you enjoy doing, that goes to passion, know what you are good at, and then try to sort of get a job that addresses all these three factors. Please do not look at the money. The money should not be a factor for making up your mind on where you'd like to work, because you could earn lots of money and you're thoroughly bored and you will lose your soul. So know what you want, know what drives you, know what you're good at, and know where you think you can make an impact. Because at the end of the day, when you are impactful, it gives you a sense of purpose. And that sense of purpose will make you enjoy your work. So those are the critical questions. Even as you seek advice, you need to ask yourself those critical questions when you come to the point of taking a decision. That's all I wanted to add to that question.
Yeah, that's perfect. Something that I often remind myself is, if money wasn't an issue, what will I be doing? And that forces me to focus on, where am I going to be impactful? What makes my heart sing? This is what I like telling, people when I do mentorship. What makes your heart sing? Think about that. And, it may seem like you cannot make money in it, but once you're working in the place that makes your heart sing, that you are being impactful, it will surprise you that you can actually, make money in it. So don't always go for the shiny things, basically. Think about where you can be impactful. So that's beautifully said, Monica. Thank you. Anybody want to tackle that question or any other question?
Piece of information.
Yes.
Yeah. Within the UN, things are relatively, well organized, and I'll share the link. I'll send the link to the convener after our meeting, where you have everything, starting from the process of expressing interest in being, part of the mentee mentoring program, to pairing, to some sort of, there is a brief training of the mentees and the mentors, and then helping you organize the way you function and get it, agree on a timetable. So these are some of the things. I'm sure you may have accessed this when organizing this meeting, because it is really absolutely easy to follow, the money somehow, because from the discussion, you could know exactly where it leads you to. And just for one comment, when you said a mentor says, well, I'm ready for you anytime, I think for me, it's not a good signal. A mentor saying, I'm available all the time. Most of the time, if a mentor is chosen, is because either of his position or his seniority or his expertise or his or her whatever, but there is something that makes the mentee or the candidate mentee, seek to be accompanied by that person. So the person should have, if I were the person, if someone contacts me and say, okay, I would like to discuss with you, I wouldn't say I'm open-ended. I would say, what would be the subject matter? What is urgent? And let us, probably because I was part of the UN mentor program for 5 years, So in my head, things are relatively well planned and I see exactly how we can move forward. So you should always give the chance to the mentee to specify, even if you have time, that time could be more usefully, spent than just, having a coffee. And one of the things we were told when I joined the program those years, it was that if you want the mentee-mentor relationship to be effective and productive, you should not behave vis-a-vis the mentee as if you were there to help him or her in her promotions, are there to guide them, to advise them, to intervene if you feel that there is something difficult on her way or his way, that in his or her capacity as a staff member, the person cannot overcome. But you should not simply hold the hand and then help the mentee to climb the stairs. You should show the way and then explain how to move in the staircase.
Perfect. Thank you. So some other questions have come in. Oh, sorry, Linda, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe just quickly. So I find that with a lot of law students or people who've recently passed the bar, they come for guidance as to what they should specialize in. And I always tell people that you should try and find yourself in a job, an organization or a law firm that gives you as wide an experience as possible, so that you can eliminate what you don't like simply by having experience in it. And I always, generally when people say straight off the bar or straight off law school, they want to do their master's, I say wait until you really know what you're truly passionate about. Give it 3 to 5 years if you can, unless you really, really know what it is that you want to do. But so often people don't. So I wouldn't be in a hurry to make decisions in terms of specialization at a very early stage. And then with regard to the mentor who says, contact me as and when, I would say that that's probably not a mentor who wants you to, as suggested by one of the mentees, draw up a mentorship schedule and stuff. Mentorship takes various forms. There are those who you have a really good, tight relationship with, who you can call upon at any time because you know them very well. Maybe they're within your workplace, so you have easy access to them. Those types of people you can talk about creating a formal mentorship relationship. But there's some mentors who maybe don't have as much time, maybe they don't know you so well, so they're perfectly happy to just give you advice as and when you need it, which is what I think that person was trying to get at. And so you've really just got to assess where you are with this person in terms of where, and maybe just have that conversation. How much time do you want us to have a formal relationship, or do you want us to just, can I just ask you for advice as and when I need it? You really need to have that conversation rather than impose it on your mentors. I'll say that.
Perfect, thank you. So now we're at our final set of questions. And this is focusing on, these set of questions sort of focus on what if you don't have all that it quote unquote takes? So for example, one question is, what if you're not a first class student, or you don't have a 2-1? What are ways that you can still shine in your career? What are ways that you can still grow or get a mentor? Another question is, do you have to study abroad? Do you have to have done fellowships abroad to be able to work in the UN, to be able to work in some of these international organizations, or even the big law firms? Those are your dreams, but you don't have the means to go abroad. But the question to the panel is, do you think that it's important that someone should try and study abroad or get a fellowship abroad? And then final question, for those who have recently graduated, or even those who are still in school, they're applying for things and they're being told that they have to put on their CV what they've done. So it's that, which come first, the chicken or the egg situation, where they're told you need to have experience even to get an internship. Those are some challenges that people have faced. I know I have faced it as well when I was starting my career about 20 years ago. So what are some of the ways that you will suggest to people who are students or recent graduates to maybe build something up for their CV that they can put on it when they're applying for positions. So I hope you got the questions. The question is, what if you don't have all that it takes? Your grades are not so great. How can you still, build yourself up? Do you need to go abroad? Do you need to do a fellowship abroad? And then what if you don't really have a lot of experience? What can you do? Thank you.
Can I kick off?
Absolutely. Pierre, please.
Okay. Yeah, on this, I would take the question, should you study abroad or seek an internship abroad? I don't think it is necessary, because most of the time, when I joined the UN, most of the people, I would say 3/4 of the persons, at least from Africans I met at the UN, had never studied abroad. And in fact, I would say I myself, it's true that I studied in Switzerland, but if already with my first qualification in the International Relations Institute of Cameroon, as a diplomat, I would have ended some way in Europe, and I could have joined the UN without having studied abroad per se. I just continued studying because it is my own personal understanding that in life, once you start studying, when you start learning, where you lose part of your personal skills, that it is good for you to continue developing your skill to study other areas, not necessarily law. For example, when I joined the UN, I had the degrees I had, which are on my CV, but I also did some 15 certifications in various areas, either in the UN, within the UN, or within some civil society organizations that provide for such training in specific areas. So no, it is not an obstacle not having studied abroad, and I don't think it is even necessary to try to get an internship abroad. I mentioned all the difficulties because of the financial, impact. At the UN, internships are free. You are not paid anything. So how do you manage? How do you survive if you manage to get the money to pay for your flight? And how do you get a space to live in? How do you get a shelter? So there are too many difficulties that may instead discourage, the potential candidates for internships abroad. So you already have places in your countries, and in most organizations, they want to see what you've done. Where you've done it is not necessary. It's what you have achieved, and who can witness that, yes, this is someone who is reliable, and if possible, have some publications. This is something that is, possible to achieve without having to be abroad. But if there is an opportunity to be abroad, why not?
Perfect. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to tackle?
Can I take the first question?
Yes, please.
The question about if you don't have it all together, if you have poor grades, how do you succeed? I come from a high school. My high school motto was never give up. Things happen. Life happens to some people. Ideally, we should all get excellent grades, but life happens. Now, when life happens, you must pick up your pieces and keep going. It's not the end of the world. And how do you try to make it out there in spite of your poor grades? First things first, assuming you get a job, you will have humble beginnings, of course, like anybody else. Even the people with the great grades have to start with humble beginnings. So wherever you start, you're going to have to prove yourself twice as much as the people with the better grades. That is the reality of life. Now, once you get onto the path of trying to prove yourself, work hard, be dependable, the same principles apply. As you work hard and endeavor to be a productive employee, also think about enhancing your capacity. You may not immediately get admission to master's programs because of your grades. However, you could start with a short professional courses, 2 weeks courses, fellowships here and there. Those will build your capacity. And with time, once you accumulate a few short professional courses here and there and build your capacity in different ways, it will probably take you longer. But eventually with productive service, short courses that have built up your capacity, all is not lost. You could still have access to a master's program and beyond. So build your capacity, look out for opportunities. You're gonna have to work twice as hard because you're already starting at a disadvantage, but it's not impossible. We've seen people succeed with poor grades. And another thing I need to mention here, there are many people studying quite young these days. While they're in school, they probably don't have their mind or sense of purpose together. And these are late boomers. They bloom late in life. They probably will not be as good in school, but they could still make productive employees at a later stage in their lives. So it is, I think, personally, I believe one of the important marks of success is the ability to fail and pick your pieces up. The ability to keep going, the tenacity never to give up.
Yes.
The ability to say, whatever the setbacks, I will pick my pieces up and I will make something of my life. That alone will drive you and push you to succeed.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Linda, I think you wanted to say something.
Yes, I don't want people to think that you can only succeed because you study abroad. That's certainly not true. And the vast majority of people haven't. But what I will say to you is I didn't have the best of grades. I was a good student at secondary school, but in my degree, my law degree, I got a 2.2, which isn't brilliant. But, you know, I made it work. When I did my bar school, towards the end, I started volunteering at a legal aid clinic. And volunteering in the true sense of the word, I did the work for free for almost 1 year. And that's how I got my first job. They saw my work and they appreciated it and they offered me a job. In terms of the fellowships that I did, the first one I did, and I want to talk about it because, you know, it was a huge achievement for me to even be considered to have been go to that program. You know, I just saw on the internet this program at Harvard on leadership in the 21st century. And I thought, wow, let me just try, you know? And I did. I sent off my application. And then a few weeks later, they said yes. And I just couldn't believe it. I'm going to Harvard. You know, I was so excited. And I got a partial fellowship. So I applied for one. I asked them if they had any. And they said yes. And then I applied for that. But I had saved some money to go for this course. So when I say self-development, you truly do have to make an investment in yourself. And then my other fellowships, one I had to pay for the ticket, which I saved for, but everything else was for free. And it came at a time when I was going through some financial difficulties, but I made the sacrifice because I believed in my self-development. For my master's degree, I approached my employer and I said, you know, I would like to go and do my master's. Do you think you could sponsor me? And because I'd been so hardworking, because I delivered results, my employer said yes. They sponsored my upkeep during my university, and I paid for everything else through my own savings. So there's so many ways you can do it. And now there's so many scholarships out there for young people. Just very recently, one of my employees who didn't have the best grades, got a scholarship because people in the industry that we work in recognized his work and asked him to apply, and he got it, and he's off. You know, he's doing his his scholarship abroad. I also want to say, I always encourage people who approach me about doing their masters. Having a master's abroad isn't a must, but it can really help you stand out. So if you can, apply to one and apply to the best university you can possibly get into. If that's Ivy League, then aim for Ivy League. If you can't maybe manage to get Ivy League, try slightly below, but do your best to get into the best possible university, because often, especially for international opportunities, lots of people, and I'm afraid it's true, there is a bias towards international degrees. So that's just a simple fact of life, and you will stand out more if you pursue those opportunities.
Thank you so much, Linda. So, Funke, if you would like the final word before we wrap up, please. Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry, yes. Yes, I mean, obviously, I think everybody has said all the right things. And vast majority of people who are in the workplace today are not people who have 2-1s or first classes, that's for sure. And so really, it is really by dint of hard work. There's no replacing hard work. That's what gets you. Even somebody who is bright, if they don't work hard, they're going to fall by the wayside. So hard work for me is really, really key. And as to whether you need a degree abroad or not, in law firms these days, even now, I don't think it's really, if you have poor grades, perhaps you may want to push that forward and try to sort of, because I find, especially in Nigeria, people like to see degrees and certificates and so on. So if you have ended up with a 3rd class, for instance, university, I think you can damage by getting a master's in a university in England or somewhere, it could help. But really the key is hard work, making sure that you stand head and shoulders above the next person just by shedding of your hard work, your resilience, and being able to be available for the work.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We have learned so much from you all, and I hope that people have taken so much from you, because all the wisdom that you shared has been extremely valuable. As Monica mentioned, integrity, build that. Even from being in law school, start thinking about the kind of lawyer that you want to have. As Funke mentioned, have a goal, focus. Imagine yourself being that marathon runner. Everybody has talked about the importance of having the mindset, the importance of reaching for the stars. Don't disqualify yourself because of your background or the grades that you've had. As was said, life happens, and life happens to all of us. I failed my bar exam the first time I took it. There's a U.S. attorney who, before he passed the bar, he failed 7 times. So do not let failure define you. Also, I have applied for many positions and did not even get an acknowledgement, talk less of an interview. As Pierre rightly mentioned, the UN can be a little bit difficult to break into, but it's not impossible. I recently even got a message for a position that I applied to a year ago, saying you were not successful. I had forgotten about it. So this happens in the UN system, but you cannot let it discourage you. We have to keep persevering. There's a beautiful light in all of us. We are meant to be and do great things. We're meant to be great people and do great things. So let us keep aspiring. Thank you so much to our amazing panelists. Thank you so much to the Institute of African Women in Law and Diverse Law. This has been an amazing panel for me, learning from all of you, and I really hope our audience enjoyed it as well. So just a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so very much. And everyone have a wonderful rest of your day.